Welcome to this explainer. With the 2026 FIFA World Cup just around the corner, absolutely everyone is obsessing over formations, tactical shifts, and fitness levels. We're all gearing up for the greatest athletic spectacle on Earth. But what if I told you the real battle for that iconic trophy is entirely invisible? Today, we're exploring some wild research that makes a seriously bold claim. Football isn't just a sport, it's actually psychology and chemistry in action. What we're diving into today is fascinating source material that reveals how every single pass, tackle, and shot is really just the visible output of two intertwined invisible systems. What we see on the pitch, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface is a hidden world of psychobiology that dictates whether a world-class striker scores a wonder goal or completely miskicks the ball under pressure. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The hidden World Cup. 2. The mind of a player. 3. The body's chemical engine. 4. When mind meets molecules. And 5. The future of football science. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the hidden World Cup, beyond tactics and technique. So you turn on the TV and commentators are endlessly debating formations and fitness, right? But the source survey asks us to look at these two invisible systems working simultaneously. On one side, you've got a psychological system governing attention, motivation, and decision-making. On the other, a biochemical system governing energy supply and hormones. This research treats football as a case study in applied psychobiology, basically arguing that treating the mind and body as separate things is pedagogically convenient but scientifically artificial. Neither system operates alone. A player's cognitive appraisal of a match directly triggers a hormonal cascade that changes their physical readiness. And conversely, if their body is chemically depleted, it actually degrades their psychological patience. Moving right along to Section 2, the mind of a player, the psychological dimensions of football. When we watch the 2026 tournament, we're obviously going to see incredibly talented athletes, but that sheer talent needs a rock-solid psychological foundation to actually translate into performance. This is perfectly explained by the inverted U hypothesis, or the Yerkes-Dodson law, which frames the immense mental pressure of tournament football. It shows us that performance improves with physiological arousal, but only up to an optimal point. After that, it falls right off a cliff. This tells us exactly why moderate pre-match nerves sharpen a player's focus, but excessive cognitive anxiety right before a sudden death penalty shootout can cause a complete technical collapse. And hey, what about team dynamics? Looking at social identity theory, we see a really critical distinction between task cohesion and social cohesion. We always kind of assume a World Cup winning squad needs to be this tight-knit group of best friends. But the research shows players don't actually need high social cohesion at all. They don't have to be best friends, and they definitely don't have to grab dinner after the match as long as they have high task cohesion, meaning they strictly agree on shared goals and their specific roles on the pitch. Now, when those players are out on the pitch, their brains are working in absolute overdrive. Elite players rely on expert pattern recognition and situational anticipation built from years of exposure. They aren't just reacting faster, they're anticipating based on deeply ingrained patterns. But there's a huge danger here. High stress can cause attention narrowing, otherwise known as tunnel vision. This means under the massive pressure of a World Cup knockout stage, a player might literally be blind to a wide-open teammate begging for the ball on a counterattack simply because their field of vision has psychologically shrunk. Let's shift gears to Section 3, the body's chemical engine, the biochemistry of performance. So how does the body chemically fuel a grueling 90-minute battle? It basically relies on three overlapping bioenergetic engines. It switches seamlessly from the instant phosphagen system for a quick 2-second sprint, straight into the glycolytic system for intense passages of play, all while resting on the oxidative or aerobic system that sustains players across the entire 90 minutes. When you see a player drop to the turf, totally exhausted at the final whistle, it's because they've completely, literally drained these biochemical tanks. Driving all of this is what the survey calls the neurochemical roster. Picture it as this dynamic cocktail of chemicals fighting for dominance inside the brain and body. Adrenaline pumps up blood flow and fight-or-flight alertness. Cortisol manages stress and mobilizes energy. And dopamine, it reinforces the euphoric feeling of a perfectly timed tackle or a killer pass, actively shaping a player's habit formation over time. But get this, how delicate is this balance? A dehydration drop of just 2% of a player's body mass significantly impairs cognitive functions like concentration and decision accuracy. Literally just 2%. And suddenly a world-class midfielder is misplacing a simple 10-yard pass. Which brings us to Section 4, when mind meets molecules, interdisciplinary synthesis. This right here is the absolute climax of our explainer. This is where mind and body lock into a continuous, rapid-fire feedback loop. They aren't separate, they actively trigger one another. If we reverse engineer a high-stakes moment, like a decisive 2026 World Cup penalty kick, we can literally see this loop in action. Step 1. The psychological appraisal of a threat. The player is terrified of missing. Step 2. This fear triggers a massive chemical release of cortisol and adrenaline. Step 3. The psychological impact, where attention narrows and tunnel vision sets in. And Step 4. The performance result. That chemical spike literally destroys the player's fine motor control, causing them to blast the ball right over the crossbar. The psychological fear chemically produced the exact physical failure they were terrified of. And it totally works in the other direction too. Depleted glycogen and dehydration, which are purely chemical states, are directly associated with reduced self-control and patience, which are purely psychological states. This perfectly explains those reckless, rash tackles we always see in the final 15 minutes of a match. As the muscles run out of glycogen, the brain literally runs out of patience. It's not all negative stress and exhaustion, however. The source research highlights that team chemistry isn't just a metaphor, it's a literal biological reality. When players engage in synchronized physical activity or shared celebrations, their bodies release oxytocin. This hormone physically bonds the squad together. So those aggressive pylon goal celebrations you see, they aren't just for the cameras. They are literally tactical, chemically induced team-building exercises cementing that vital cohesion. Finally, let's look ahead with Section 5, the future of football science. Gaps in the current literature. As we look toward 2026, postgraduate scientists are literally racing to break new ground and fill these research gaps. They're trying to overcome regulatory constraints to track real-time salivary cortisol via wearables right on the pitch during a match. And incredibly, they're also trying to measure exactly how a roaring crowd, that famous home advantage, alters not just the players, but a referee's biochemistry in real time. Just think about how crazy that is. Crowd noise literally altering a referee's biology. So the overarching takeaway from this whole literature survey is pretty undeniable and honestly mind-blowing. Treating the mind and the body like they're totally separate disciplines is scientifically artificial. Every single action you'll see on the pitch next summer is shaped by psychological processes and physically enabled by biochemical regulation. It is a single, flawlessly interacting system. So I'll leave you with this question. Armed with this brand new X-ray vision of how the mind meets molecules, watch the next match. Next time a player steps up for a penalty in 2026, don't just watch the ball. Ask yourself, can you spot the invisible chemistry deciding the fate of the entire tournament? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you for the next explainer.